developing the mathematical language that they need. Lastly, it gives ELLs multiple opportunities to access and make meaning of the math content. So that's just a little framing of why instructional routines are so critical. But I do want to point out that routines alone are not enough. And so that scaffolding piece within the routines are also very important. So as Joe was giving us the learning intentions for today, we're going to start by familiarizing ourselves with two resources for math that we have at DML. And I will be kind of guiding you through a little activity about that. So we will take some time to preview the resources, and I want you to consider the following. Everything will be accessible through one link. We're going to engage in a Padlet. And I want you to think about what do you see about these documents? What do you think about them? And what do you wonder? So let me click on the Padlet link if we could be shared in the chat. Now I have a question. Can you see my screen, the Padlet? Awesome, thank you. So what you will see here, we're going to use this Padlet twice today. So on the left-hand side are the documents. One of them is called Scaffolding Mathematic Instructions for all grade levels. So you'll have some time to read through these. And then the other document, it's a little bit more extensive, and it's the instructional routine document. Sorry. There we go. So the first part is just some quick links, and I want you to just kind of, again, you're skimming through it. I know it's a lot to read, but you'll go over the document and its different parts. Now here's where I'm going to guide you. When you see what do you see, if you haven't used the Padlet before, but even if you have, I do want you to pay attention to this bit. You're going to add, for the title, I would really love it if you can put your name or your initials, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then in the write something is where I actually want you to write and type I see, and then you want to post it. And then I want you to do the same with what do you think and what do you wonder. So before we get into that, does anybody have any questions? Okay, so we're going to have about 8 minutes to do this, reviewing the documents and what do you see, what do you think, what do you want? I am loving some of these reactions. I just thought I'd, come out and shout out to all of you. And just a reminder, we're only filling out the first 3 columns. What do you see? What do you think? And what do you wonder? We will come back to the rest of the columns by the end of the session. Great idea, you guys. I love what you're all writing. Really amazing. All right, we're gonna have about 1 more minute. The Padlet will stay open, so those of you that definitely want to get your ideas out there, I encourage you to go back. I do want to open it up maybe for, well, actually, let me give you another minute. All right, so I'm going to bring it back to the group. Some very amazing stuff written here. So just want to open it up if there's anything somebody wants to, something somebody wants to highlight or just bring about. I'll give you guys a moment. Feel free to also use the chat. Okay, so what we're going to do next is then let's get jumping into, well, what does this really look like? So we are going to engage in parts of the instructional routine together. Not all parts, but I'll try my best to guide you through some of them. And there are student samples that I have available for you to see that we can talk about. If you saw in the document, the instructional routine today is called Capturing Quantities. And there are 5 parts, each which I will give a little bit more attention and detail to during the presentation. Now, in the first part of the routine, the teacher is launching the routine to the students, while in the other parts, the teacher now begins to guide the students through the routine. Now, as we engage in this routine together, I really want you to jot down any scaffolds that you are seeing that are embedded within the routine, any teacher moves or any instructional moves that you feel support students. So, you know, whether you're taking your digital notes or whether you're using pen and paper, please be conscious during the presentation to jot these ideas down. We will talk about them afterwards. So now let's begin. So part 1 of the routine, the purpose of this part is to display and explain the thinking goal as well as the format. So why are we doing this routine? We're doing this to look for and represent quantities and relationships behind the numbers in a problem statement. What is the reason we're doing this? Well, as we know, we're all mathematicians here. And so to think like mathematicians, we want to be able to find quantities and relationships in problem situations and in diagrams. So you might be wondering, what on earth are quantities and relationships? So what I would like to do is to preview and examine some of the academic vocabulary that you will need in order to engage in this routine. So I'm just going to click on the link. And I do want to point out that, you know, academic vocabulary is more than just spelling and definitions and grammar, but it's really about, just like in math, finding patterns and structures that exist within the language. So some of the things that we're going to keep in mind is sequential language, like first, second, then, and finally. There's some mathematical syntax here, like the $sign and the percent sign. And I do want to raise your morphological awareness with some cross-discipline and discipline-specific vocabulary. So you can use this table freely. So you'll notice that some of the words are broken down into their prefix, their suffix, and their root, and you have some cognates, which are words that sound similar in many languages to support you. So I'm just going to go over one of them with you. So let me go over the word reflect. So the word reflect has a prefix re, which means back and again. There is no specific root in this word, but the prefix here, the suffix, I'm sorry, the flect means to bend. And so some words here that are very similar in the way they are written, you will see here on this side. So this is just to support your learning, but we're going to go back to the routine now. So, as I explain the parts of the routine, I want you to pay attention to the sequential language that I am using, underlined for you, and it indicates the order in which things are going to happen. So for the first part of this routine, you're going to be identifying quantities and relationships individually. Then you're going to be sharing with a peer, and then you'll be coming back to the whole group to discuss. Secondly, you will be creating some diagrams to represent those quantities and relationships, and then you'll be discussing with a peer again. After that, you will be discussing the diagrams with the whole group, And again, you will be engaging in this cycle of individual time, pair, and then discuss. And finally, we'll end our routine with some reflection on today's learning. Okay, so in this part, so we're going to engage in the, yes.
Sorry, and just some people have raised, I think your voice is going a little bit in and out, or it's not your voice, the sound of it. So just make sure to speak directly into the, maybe closer to the
I'm gonna bring the computer closer. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries at all. So what I'll do now is I'm actually going to start now in the engagement part of the routine. I also have a lot of trucks outside plowing the snow, so I'm sorry. All right, so in this first part of the routine, you are going to read for quantities and relationships, and then you're going to engage in a think, pair, share cycle. So in this part, we're going to read, and you're going to ask yourself as you're reading, what can I count or measure? But before you consider what you can count or measure, I really would like to take some time to put this problem into context for you and maybe consider the type of questions that can be asked. So we're going to go into a Jamboard link right now. So I invite you to follow me here. I'm going to stay here for a bit. And if you haven't used a Jamboard before, what we're going to do is on the left-hand side, you will see there's a sticky note. So you can write a sticky note, you can make your comment, and you can change the color if you'd like, and then you can save it. So that you'll be able to comment here. All right, so in the first slide, I'm going to read the problem stem with you, and then we're going to have some time to answer this. So the problem stem. If you have a coupon that's worth $18 off the purchase of, worth $18 off the purchase of a sweater. At the same time, the sweater is offered with a discount of 15%, but no further discount may be applied. So the question I have for you all is, what are some experiences that you have had with this type of situation? And so take the sticky note and let's start writing that down. I'd like to know what your experiences with a situation like this have been.
What are we doing?
So we are, so the problem stem, which is, think about it as the word problem that the student would get, is the one at the top right here.
Okay.
And what you're answering is, what have been your experiences with a situation like this?
Great, thank you. I didn't see the link, thanks.
No worries. These are great, great responses, everyone. So I like this question, about, I don't think I've used a coupon in years. Do students even know what that is? I'm wondering about the physical coupon versus, I don't know about some of you, but so I have a Macy's account, and when I go to Macy's, all my coupons are now automatically like linked to the card. So while I may not be taking a physical coupon with me, there is always some kind of discount or coupon applied. And at least this was my experience, right? But thank you. All right, these are all very great. I'm very glad if you have a chance to read some of them. I see that some experience are like thinking about which is better. An experience is that it is confusing. So I do want to highlight some of those. Depends on the price of the sweater, question mark, love that. And then unclear, okay. All right, so what we're gonna do now is go to the second slide. And it's the same exact problem, but if you notice, the reason why it's called a problem stem is because there is no question. And so now what I want to ask you is what are some possible questions that may be answered given this information? Same idea, grab a sticky note. Which is the better deal? Is $18 more or less than the 15% off the regular price? Good, these are some great questions. And so maybe I'll display what the question is at the very end, but these are great. Okay, so.
I was gonna ask, like, how could you ask what the better deal is without some further information?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How would you ask what the better deal is without further information? See what I'm asking?
I'm not even sure that I get the question, so I'm trying to think about it.
Like, how could you ask which is the better deal without knowing the original price of the sweater is what I'm asking.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, with here, I don't know if I want to give it away yet. I think that's part of like my hesitation.
Okay,
But
wait,
right, it's kind of no, right. We don't know what the price of the sweater is, right? And so that's kind of taken out of this problem. By the way, just to let you know, this is an 8th grade math problem from illustrative mathematics from that curriculum, if anybody was interested in knowing that.
Sorry, I had a question. It says you have a coupon worth $18 off purchase of a sweater, but it says at the same time the sweater is offered with a discount. So I'm wondering, are both discounts, can they both be used at the same time?
Excellent question. No, the 2 discounts may not be used at the same time. So that's why if you see at the end, but no further discount may be applied. So they would not be able to use the 15% and the $18.
No, I saw that, but sometimes, you know how they have manufacturer's coupons? I just figure you could use those 2 coupons, but you cannot bring your own coupons aside.
And it's valid, right? Sometimes we are able to do that.
Okay, so it's one or the other. Got it.
All right, so I'm going to bring you guys back to the routine itself. And so the first part, again, it's what I want you to do is to think about, even though we didn't do this in the Padlet, now I really want you to, in your mind, not in your mind, jot it down. What can you count or measure in this problem? And what we're going to do is you're going to go into breakout rooms. There'll be a few people in the room with you. And what I would like you to do is share that information. There are a few sentence steps here for you to use if you want. I can count the number of blank. I can measure the amount of blank. So you're going to go into the breakout rooms for a few minutes just to have the ability to share that information. And then I want you to come back to the whole group. And let me show this to you before you go out. You're going to come back to the group, and I'm encouraging you to rephrase how you heard the information from somebody else. There's also additional sentence stems here, like the number of blank is an important quantity because, and this quantity is related to this quantity in such way. So just to give you a little bit more language when you come back, but for now in your breakout rooms, you're just sharing what can you count or measure in this problem. So Yesenia, if you can bring them into breakout rooms, and we're going to be here for about 4 minutes.
Perfect. I am setting up breakout rooms and they should be able to log in now. Four minutes. 37, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Lenny, sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. All right. Love having facilitators. All right. So for this part of the routine, what I want you to do now is to share with the whole group what you heard within your own breakout rooms. But I do encourage you to now start using some of these other sentences to think about the relationships, such as the number of blank is an important quantity because, but also just how are these quantities related? So that's, that's really the question here, is how are some of these quantities related? So I invite you to unmute. I invite you to put it in the chat, however you'd like.
I'll start.
Thank you.
My group talked about, I guess there are really two important numbers in this, which is the number of dollars you save with one coupon, which is 18. The other important quantity is the 15 percentage points that you would save with the other coupon. Quantity A, so $18 is related to the 15% because at some point it becomes less to your advantage to use one coupon over the other. A very simple way to think about that would be to make it $100. 15% is $15. $18 is still to your advantage. So you'd have to be paying more than $100 for the sweater, probably $120 or something like that. Is that what you're going for?
Jesse, awesome answer. Thank you. No, we could stay here and definitely talk more about this. I know, especially when we're math people, we can keep going. Is there anybody else that would like to share another one?
Sure. In our group, we discussed that the final price was probably the most relevant quantity, and it's related to the discount by subtraction, I guess.
Thank you, Ben. Yep, that's great. All right. So let's move on to the next part of the routine, where we are actually going to begin to create some diagrams. So in this part of the routine, you will create a visual representation of the quantities and relationships you have identified. So first, you will think about a representation on your own, and then we will refine our thinking with a peer. Now, I do want to let you know that for the purposes of our learning together, we will only engage in the individual think time, but I do have samples that we will review from students that we can compare with our own learning. So, part one. At this point of the routine, you're going to visually represent the situation. So think about and represent the important quantities and relationships in the diagram. There are three focus questions. How can I present the important quantities and relationships using a visual diagram? How much bigger or smaller is one quantity than the other? And how can I show how much bigger or smaller one quantity is in my diagram? So I want you to take out your writing devices, whether you're using digital or like me, I need pen and paper. But right now I want you to start to really think about this problem and create a diagram that represents the problem step. And you know what, maybe, can we put the problem maybe in the chat so that everybody's able to read the problem stem, please?
Yeah, actually, I put it in, I'll put it in again, but it's
Oh,
11,
thank you,
11,
Joel.
11,
Perfect.
11:37 was when I put
Okay.
that in.
So just to let you know, in this part of the routine as a teacher, you do not let the student fully complete the diagram. So I may be cutting you off from your lovely diagrams soon. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to give kids more of a reason to kind of discuss rather than having something fully completed. But I think it also just depends on the teacher. I mean, if you really want your students to finalize their diagrams, you know, you should have that flexibility to do so. So I'm going to bring you back, and I don't know if anybody would like to share and maybe put up on the camera or just let us know what kind of diagram did you make? And just describe the diagram, not necessarily the math behind it, but just your thinking of how. Jesse, I started to see a diagram up there. What's that? All right, I see it's like a graph in a way, right? Yeah. And were you plotting points?
Yeah, so the dollar saved versus the original price of the item, and then you have the two different lines represent the coupons. Does that make sense?
Cool. Anybody else have another diagram? Ben, I'm seeing something. I love it. I see a sweater. Would you like to explain it a bit?
Yeah, I don't know if it qualifies as a diagram.
It does.
It's more like a couple of equations, and I don't know any of the stuff that I want to know to fill in. But yeah, I have an unknown cost of a sweater, and I take away $18, and that gives me what I'm really interested in, which is how much I have to pay. And then I have the same unknown cost of the sweater, and I take 15% of that and subtract that, and then I get some other number that I don't know. And now I want to know which of those numbers that I don't know is smaller, actually. I said which one's bigger, but actually I care which one's smaller, I suppose.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. That's great. All right, maybe we'll do one more. And if not, that's okay. I definitely have samples. Okay. So for the next part, what would normally happen, and again, this is where for the next part, students, so I want to show you some student thinking samples, just like many of you were just also doing this on your own and showing. So I want you to take a look at what students did in comparison to your own diagrams. And just think about, like, what did you learn about your diagram? What did you learn about others, the students, as well as your colleagues? And so you'll see here, here are the questions that were actually in the previous slides. And so this student realized that the percent discount was an important quantity, which we all kind of were talking about that as well. And this student recognized that percent is out of 100, so they made blocks to represent that. And then they said that the coupon is also an important quantity. And they know that if they compare, they needed to use the same units. So that's why they ended up keeping the 100 block. So they assumed that if the sweater cost 100, this is the diagram that they would be able to produce. So I want to show you another sample. So then the question goes on is like, how much bigger or smaller? So the student is able to say that if the sweater is 100, then $18 would be more, right? And then therefore the 15% coupon would be worth less. And then how did they show it? They showed this by assuming that the sweater was 100. So this is one sample. Here's the other sample for a student. So the student started to do a diagram like this. And so I needed to compare how much bigger or smaller the discount and the coupon is. So I think that's why the student was separating it. And then they wrote that 18 is bigger than 15, but because 18 is in dollars and the 15 is in percent, they're not the same unit. So I really don't know which one is bigger. And then I love this is, how can I show how much bigger or smaller the quantity is? This student recalled that they can show this by using inequality symbols to compare. So you have two students processing also very different from the way that we were here in this group. So once the students had time to do the diagrams, then they would share with a peer. And what would happen here is that you would have student A asking one student, well, how did you represent this quantity? And you'll have one student responding, and then you'll have student B, well, how did you represent the final price of the sweater? So in this case, they're having a dialogue. Hopefully it's between pairs or triads, again, you would think about, but the idea is for them to continue to talk and express their diagrams. Part 4 of the routine is where the teacher looks at the diagrams presented by the students and then encourages them to redraw them unlabeled. And what happens here is that this will be presented with the whole group. So just to give you kind of the way one of them looks, it's a student would have time to look at the diagram that the students created, but notice nothing is labeled here. And so you can ask either individual or with the class, what quantities can they identify comparing this chart or this diagram that's unlabeled with the problem stem itself. So a student here had said, I can identify the price of the sweater at the top. I can identify the 100 chart, which may be the percent because I learned that percent is out of 100. And then they begin to think about what relationships. I noticed there is a relationship between percents and 100. And then students will just, again, have the time to talk about this with the peers. How did so and so group present their quantities? How is their diagram different from theirs? And then students discuss. The teacher then either annotates or supports students in identifying all the different pieces. And again, the teacher's choosing one or two diagrams to kind of move forward with the class. I think there's some flexibility here in showing all of the diagrams. So you really have to think about what parts of the routine you may like. And then lastly, a very important part of the routine, and actually in all of the instructional routines that I've seen in math, this reflection piece is very, very important. So you will ask students to write their reflection and maybe share with a peer. And so what you'll see here is the ones in dark blue would be sentence stems that I would provide for students. Like when looking for patterns and quantities in a word problem, I've learned ... right? And then what's in light blue is what some students may have answered. So for example, I'll read the second to last bullet. When capturing quantities, next time I will read the statement multiple times to check for more quantities. So this is just some of the responses that you may get. I would encourage that that students only use one or two. The idea is not for them to reflect on every single one, but really to choose the one that they're reflecting on their own learning. So this was an overview of the routine. Again, I'm sorry that with the time I was only able to engage in a few of the parts in the beginning in detail. But I do want to take the last time. I know that there were some great questions on the Padlet, and I know there were some on the chat and some that would like to highlight. But what I would like you to do right now is to spend some time reflecting on the embedded scaffold. So I don't know if you remember, but I was asking you to jot down any scaffolds that you thought you saw throughout the routine. So we're going to go back to the Padlet. It's the same Padlet that we were using before when we were reviewing the resources. And so you're going to go towards the end of the Padlet on the right. And so you're going to answer these questions, and we will have a time to come back with the whole group and talk about this. So I'll give you guys about 5 minutes for this. What were some teacher moves that support students in focusing on the learning and the new math content? What were the scaffolds in place in the routine? And how would you implement an instructional routine like this in your practice? And so I just encourage you guys to think about that for now.
Lenny, how many minutes would you like us to
So
spend
I
on
would
this reflection?
like to spend about, let's say 7 minutes, 7 minutes. And then I want to give the time to come back to the whole group and just talk, right? And highlight anything, push back, really open it up. All right, so I'm gonna bring it back. And remember the Padlet stays open. You can definitely follow up with all of these results. And maybe we can open it up, or should I do a little cheat sheet and show you some of the scaffolds that were embedded within the routine? I'll also share with you the question. But I also did want to open it up, especially for that last one, like how would you implement? And so just to show you the scaffolds. There's actually quite a bit of scaffolds that are embedded in the routine, which are multiple opportunities to really practice language. There's a cycle of repeat, rephrase, reword, record embedded, and that is a scaffold within itself. There were language supports I saw from the Padlet. You guys definitely got that. There were some sentence stems, which are for students to finish the sentence. And there were sentence frames where students complete certain parts of it. Another very important scaffold from this routine is that the question is omitted from the problem. So that way students don't have this pressure of, I need to answer, I need to get the right answer, but it's really just thinking about the text at hand. And in addition to that, the routine provides focus questions and individual think time. Now, some additional scaffolds that I actually purposely added within the routine is, if you noticed, I had the vocabulary sheet. I could definitely have spent more time previewing that language, going over that with students, but really examining the morphology. One that I didn't use here, but I would consider you, if you were going to implement instructional routines in your class, having a journal, especially as that reflection process, would always be good, so that students are realizing, how are they learning? How is their learning changing? One thing about another scaffold that I did was I spent some time contextualizing the problem for you. So rather than going straight into reading, I was actually asking you about your experiences with this situation. I was asking you about what you think the question would be. And so those were just some other scaffolds that were there. And so if you had your notes that you were jotting, I don't know if you checked any of those out, but I do know that some of them were visible to you, and that was captured through the Padlet. So we have a few minutes left, and I really just want to open up the space for anything, any questions, anything. And Joel and Rachel, I also invite if you can support me with some of this, and so yeah.
Can I ask a verbal question?
Absolutely.
So do you have some, I like how you just described your scaffolding. Do you have some sort of, master list of scaffolding that you could share, for this type of thing?
So I will follow. So there's the document that we had in the beginning that we reviewed. That's a general document that I use. Let me see if I can actually pull it up and share it. It's a document that I use to guide my thinking with some of this. So let me bring it back up to. So the supporting documents, and they were inside of the Padlet. It's this one right here. So we have this document called Scaffolding Math Instruction for All Grades. And if you see the first one, it was building background knowledge, and bullet 2 says, whenever possible, contextualize new concepts in math for what is already familiar. So that's kind of where I borrowed that idea. You will also see here in the second one, teach prefixes and suffixes, morphology, something that I also tried to embed here. So this is the document that I'm using as I guide myself through scaffolds. And that document is available to you in the Padlet. I'm sure we'll be having a follow-up email with this information as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to raise a question that was in the chat from Jamie, and I don't know if they're here to raise it up, but they kind of brought up the idea of routines versus choice and variety, and when to do what, if they want to expound upon that. But
Yeah,
maybe
I
you
saw
speak
that,
to
and I saw that, and I think it's great. You know, I think it changes, depends on, are you in person or remotely? And in this world, we really have to reflect on that. You know, the idea is for students to eventually just be able to become mathematical thinkers, right? And you want them to eventually be able to sniff for quantities. And so that, I don't know, is it something that would then be done routinely in your mind, right? But it is, there's a point where there has to be choice, right? And so, yes, I gave you sentence stems, but maybe that wasn't for all students, right? Maybe you use parts of this routine and not all parts of it. Maybe this routine isn't for the particular problem that you're doing, but it works for another. So there has to be a balance. And I don't know if I saw that in the comment, but there definitely has to be a balance. And you have to be flexible with yourself and with your students in using these. But I think that there's a lot to say about using something routinely for ELLs. And so that's just something that I do want to bring to light. Any challenges? Sometimes that's always one that, do you foresee any challenges with this? Where would you maybe modify a bit for your school and your students?
I think like the earlier scaffolding you provide in the beginning could be like a pretty simple asynchronous lesson for the student to access, right? And that's something that we always need to keep in the back of our mind, that like whatever content we're presenting currently needs to be accessed later. And so I don't know, that's just something I noticed that I like that aspect of it, that like it sort of isolates, much like most lesson plans do, but it's pretty discreet in the information it wants to get across, and it makes you like focus on that, and it's a good place for the student to get into things.
Yeah, awesome. So in case anybody wanted to really have that question before they left, the actual question to the math problem is, at which point is the discount and the coupon worth the same amount? So I'll leave you with that question in mind if you want to go ahead and solve it. But the resources are there. There is another document similar to it with a different instructional routine called like something about representations, capturing different representations. And so I do invite you to look at those documents. I will be doing a PD, a 3-day series on instructional routines. This will probably be one of them. So I just welcome you to reach out, and thank you so much for joining. It was really a pleasure being here and being invited to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rachel, Joe, Jasenia, for helping.
Bye.
It makes
Thank
it
you.
smooth.
Thank you, Lenny, for presenting
Yes.
and capping off this series. Thank you. We've really touched all content areas, and we're grateful for your participation in the collaboration with CTE. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll give it a few more minutes and then I'll close the room in case.
Thank you,
anyone else-
Yesenia. Have a wonderful day, okay?
Thank you, you too.
Hope you get some rest this evening.
Yes, I will try. Thank you, you too.